Hey everybody, and welcome to the first episode of Beyond GIS. I'm your host, Kurt Jensen, and founder of Orbica. The topic of today's episode is to sort of break down and understand GIS, geospatial, and this term digital geography. We want to discuss it, what it means, why it's relevant, and why it's important for today's leaders to understand it. So simplistically, if we think about geography in a simplistic way, it's just about understanding the planet, the processes, the physical processes of the planet, and then the sort of social implications of humans living on the planet and understanding how best to utilize its resources. Everything happens somewhere in time and space, and geography, geospatial, GIS, is all about understanding that and what that means and how we as humans make better use of the planet for increasingly important environmental, social, cultural, and obviously economic outcomes going forward. There's a law of geography called Tobler's first law of geography, and what it really states is everything is related to everything else, but near things are more related to each other than far things. And in a simplistic way, if you think about the jargon associated with GIS and geospatial as a whole, just think, what's that mental map of where these assets exist on the electrical network, where my customers are, i.e. houses, industrial plants, irrigation plants, and users, and what's the relationship between them? And starting to go, how do we in the world of the modern grid, for instance, start to optimize where our network goes, investment into the network itself for transmission of electricity, and starting to then drive an understanding of changes coming forth. So we've got microgrids, we've got solar, we've got micro wind generation. What's linked to all of that? Weather. Well, weather happens time and place. There's historical weather, there's future weather forecasts, right? So it's that mapping element and that understanding of where weather happens and associated climatic predictions is linked obviously to a location of the planet, which is then linked to customers and the network. And across big networks, the weather and the climate can be very dispersed and different. And so the treatments, the investments going into different parts of the network need to take account of this stuff. And so think about that nearness, the importance of understanding the location, and the importance of being able to use geospatial techniques as the glue to start to tie together these disparate domains of data for that common good. So customers, location, CRM, network, where is it, linear sort of polygon, point line assets represented inside a geospatial database, and then weather, which would come in as a completely different format, like potentially a net CDF. The location element is the common glue to bring it all together. And really historically, that's where the world of GIS has evolved from. GIS, Geographic Information Systems, is a technical term. It's been used as a set of tools to manage, manipulate, and sort of drive insights out of geospatial data for many decades now, and it's been evolving at a fast pace. However, it's still very linked to desktops. It's still very linked to teams or experience like my background as a GIS professional, and the world is changing really fast. Geospatial, which is sort of an umbrella term that's bigger than GIS. So think about GIS as a set of tools really designed for a GIS professional, a geospatial professional, and typically trained at university, often through a geography department, i.e. my background. The tools are getting democratized quite quickly. And really it started with the advent of Google Maps. And the consumers started to understand the importance of place and location and GPS and what that means to their everyday lives. And the classic slippery maps concept of on my smartphone I can kind of have everything at my fingertips led to the revolution of starting to lift and shift geospatial and GIS workflows into the cloud. That's ever increasing, and we need to, as GIS professionals and practitioners, we need to really start embracing all these new technologies We need to impose and lead the geospatial elements of these processes, of these software packages, of these new techniques, and work really collaboratively with developers, application developers, data analysts, data scientists, engineers, planners, to make ourselves really relevant in their world. We want to be enabling experts of geospatial. Now, with that in mind, we also have to acknowledge that the tools at the moment are pretty inaccessible. And it's really important that we as a geospatial industry move forward and start to drive into this sort of new world of what we're calling digital geography. To me, at its simplest form, digital geography is just a digital framework, a set of data and tools and software and techniques that allow us to represent the world really well, but it's abstracted a bit higher, right? GIS is a very technical term, full of jargon and creates silos. Geospatial is better, but again, it's still a relatively technical term, do we call it geospatial data? Do we call it location data? Really, we're trying to abstract it one step further where less confusion should happen, because everyone has some concept of what geography means. Digital, well, that obviously means computers, software, technology, right? So that's our view on why digital geography is important. That's our view of the evolution of where GIS sort of came from. And it's moved into the world of geospatial, which is a broader set of tools available to more folks to leverage the power of geospatial data. But really, it's still struggling to break through to executives and key decision makers about why it's important. Geospatial is still, again, very misunderstood by most folks. And so we as an industry need to move forward and think about new ways of shifting the needle, of educating the sector, and really driving home the importance of geography in the modern world. So with the acknowledgement of sort of geospatial and digital geography, trying to break out of the confines of siloed GIS professionals, and as GIS professionals, how we want to start leading and having a bigger outsized impact on the sector at large and be more relevant, because we all inherently know the power of what we do and the potential, particularly in the world we live in now with so much change, with the global grand challenges coming our way, the impact of, or the secondary impact of climate change, for instance, right? This is all geospatial. It's all happening somewhere at different rates, at different speeds, across different geographies, have different impact on different sort of social, cultural, environmental and economic outcomes and sort of KPIs. We need to understand this stuff. It's on us to have the tools and enable many more people to leverage the power of geospatial than ourselves as an industry being causing a bottleneck, I guess. This century, I think, is going to be, I want to see the rise of geography being talked about a lot more again in the modern world. Many schools, geography is not even taught anymore. But it's so relevant and so pertinent to everything we do every day across the whole world. And it is amazing to me that so many decisions about, critical infrastructure across the country are still made by engineers inside a spreadsheet. And we're talking about, critical electrical, water, whatever infrastructure, emergency response infrastructure. And maps are just, and associated geospatial analysis is not being asked as part of the equation. We're a second or third class citizen, and really it needs to become a first class citizen in executives and business leaders' decision making inside their role day to day. So we at Orbica are really focused on being part of that change, really helping enable and permeate and push the value of geospatial and digital geography well beyond the confines of GIS. And we simply believe it's so required to make the sorts of decisions as the dynamic changing world we live in to ensure that we leave it a better place for future generations. So on that sort of concept we talked about before and the importance of GIS and trying to bring it down to a base level understanding of it's about geography, the planet, the world, and humans utilizing the resources and living upon the planet and how we optimize all of this. we then couple that with just the tsunami of data hitting us all the time. You know, our organizations have so much information, we're not getting value out of it. It's too hard to find value in all the data we have, coupled with the new constellations in space, new drones, Internet of Things sensors everywhere, right? It's just a tsunami of data coming our way. The only way to handle it is to truly transform to the cloud. We need to lift and shift processes and systems and workflows that are sitting on desktops and in-house servers and old enterprise licensing regimes and truly cloud enable them, leveraging the elasticity, the on-demand aspects of the cloud with a view to enable far more people than have access to the knowledge and the tools and the data to drive decision-making in business. So, you know, with this in mind, it's really important that knowledge is permeated. You know, we're trying to pioneer geospatial democracy. And to us, that simply means getting the tools and the software and the power of this data in the hands of many more users than currently have it. And we can't do that by ourselves. You know, a community needs to move forth and make this happen. And just like the internet enables everybody in this modern world to connect and do all the business we do these days, right? We all know the impact of the internet. You know, what impact can geography and geospatial have at a core if it just became bread and butter inside a business, that it's just stuff we do inside our business? Like Excel is used now for decision making everywhere, still, how do we get maps and analysis and geospatial data in the hands of so many that it just becomes a fabric of how we make decisions going forward and everybody simply understands it? You know, in the world of consumer tech, and if we think about what's happened with Google Maps, Airbnb, you know, these big consumer tech companies, Uber, it's that frictionless experience to the outcome that has driven, obviously, their success, their growth, the demand for their services. And so often in enterprise land, you know, people live this consumer world of frictionless experiences, being able to call a cab within minutes, seconds. Why is it so often that our enterprise processes are so behind the sort of consumer tech world we live in? You know, that disparity of the smartphone apps we have for work and the smartphone apps we have for our day-to-day life outside of work. How do we start to bring some of those frictionless modern experiences to the world of enterprise? And, you know, in our world, how do we start to make sure geospatial is core to all of that? The journey has started with modern mapping applications, but how do we go deeper? How do we get into the world of, as a farmer, I would love it if the reps of the farming supply organizations that were selling me stuff on my farm would come and be really educated, would teach me something, would have an application, and they would know at their fingertips what's been sold to them in the past. You know, hey, in this location, at this time of year, with the climate forecasts that are coming, we really believe that you, Mr. Farmer, should be doing X, Y, and Z to drive the environmental and economic outcomes you're looking for. You know, that ability to overlay, you know, climate forecasts with current state of vegetation health or crop health from space, with historical buying purchases, would really drive a knowledgeable, informed discussion for that farmer with the rep. And so all of a sudden you're building a data-driven, knowledge-driven relationship instead of the more classic, you know, how are you going? Nice to see you again. Let's have a cup of tea. And when you think about the outcomes at a business or organizational level, that's going to give significant competitive advantage if you can lead the charge on that compared to your competitors. So look, just an example to think through of frictionless consumer experiences. How do we start to bring some of that goodness to the world of enterprise and the customers enterprises are trying to serve? And how do we geospatial and digital geography enable those workflows, those apps, those processes, so they become a first-class citizen inside a business? So there's a couple of sort of headline things we'll discuss in future podcasts, actually, in future episodes. One of them is silos, and I've touched on that a little bit today. The impact of GIS and geospatial silos is everywhere, and it's not just geospatial, it's other functions of business, of course. The point is there's silos across business. We as geospatial professionals should start to permeate our knowledge and show the organisation how we can help glue the organisation together. To do that, we're going to have to use new processes, new software, new techniques. We're going to have to leverage the cloud. And so in future episodes, we'll go a bit deeper into that concept. Another one is starting to think through, how to enable the benefits of geospatial and digital geography. We need to rethink standards and sort of data governance processes and process governance within an organisation. This is something we'll go deeper into as well in future episodes. But as a way to quickly think about it, metadata, we all talk about it, no one wants to do it, but it's important to everything. Rubbish in, rubbish out. Knowing the importance of it, how do we start to automate governance processes around it? So just something to consider, because so often institutional knowledge is lost, someone leaves, business changes direction, a supply of a data set no longer exists. The metadata around those input data sources is so vital, and it needs to permeate beyond the folks you hire within the team. It needs to become true institutional knowledge that stands the test of time. And I guess something else we'll dive deeper into in future episodes is the cost to serve this stuff, the cost of implementing geospatial across a business. So I would argue that there's a much bigger cost to not doing it, but that comes back to us as we have to educate the sector and help drive our executives and decision-making processes in a direction where they'll inherently understand the value that geospatial and geography brings to their business and what they do. But in the meantime, again, like we're seeing with many other shifts in other technology sort of ecosystems, we need to start embracing the cloud, the on-demand, the elasticity of cloud. We need to start rethinking how we enable business and folks within business to get more. And we need to have a really good think about how often is it across my enterprise software stacks, is it that the named user paradigm, for instance, is holding me back, or the organization back, or my staff back from actually getting the job done and having the tools they need to, again, find the value in data. So let's think about cost. Let's think about modern cloud approaches to value-driven software, platforms, SaaS products, and whatnot. And let's think about how we more clearly articulate ROI. End of the day, often business decisions keep coming back to the P&L, the balance sheet. And we need to, as geospatial professionals and organizations, really help move the needle to show why we're so important, what the ROI looks like, and just get better at articulating that. We do that, we show our value, we lead to awesome outcomes, we embed geospatial into many business streams and functions across the business. It'll just become like the internet, just acknowledged as a thing we have to do because it's so important to every function across the business. So cost is a factor, but let's really start to think about how we value geospatial, how we present the ROI, which will drive the decision-making processes, budgeting processes, and investment processes into geospatial, into the future. So to sum up, we've talked about GIS, geospatial and digital geography briefly, from sort of its origins as GIS back in the 50s and 60s, through to the early 2000s where geospatial became a bit more permeated through the likes of Google Maps and developer tools around it, to the world now that we're trying to further permeate the understanding and bring it back to the core concepts of geography. So with all that in mind, we need to start to think about our internal processes, how we're enabling our staff in the business and staff of various interlocking agencies to work better together. We need to think about leveraging the latest cloud technologies with embedded geospatial goodness within them, to start to break down silos, to start to break down impediments to growth within a business, whether that's jargon, whether that's software not fit for purpose, whether that's too many sources of truth because we've got everybody operating on desktops, on C drives, not in singular source of truth locations, whether that's just the cost of implementing enterprise geospatial software. We need to look across all of that and start to put together a new sort of geospatial strategy and associated approaches and plans to make sure we empower our stakeholders, our decision makers, our executives, our leaders with geospatial insights and drive geospatial data decision making inside all business functions where we can have an outsized impact. We know that inherently looking after the planet and human use and interaction of the planet is everything this century. That is what geospatial and geography can do. It can really drive value into that world, and instead of trying to understand closed jargon and software, let's push the knowledge and the tools and the data sets into the hands of many. So again, it becomes like the internet. We've got environmental scientists, engineers, planners, data practitioners, and of course, being led by geospatial professionals, often leading the charge. You know, I read an article not too long ago, there's 400,000 GIS professionals in the world. That's a silo. There's tens and tens of millions of developers, of planners, of analysts, of scientists, environmental scientists, of data scientists. They're the folks we need to enable with geospatial data and tools to have this outsized impact. So, look, thanks for listening, and we'll see you at the next one.